I'm Robbie Lepsick with Great Feathers Fly Shop, and today we're going to tie the black woolly bugger. So to tie a black woolly bugger, you're going to need a couple materials. Number one, you're going to need some thread. I'm using a Uni 6/0 in chartreuse. The color doesn't really matter too much. It just depends on what you want. Some people like a natural color, like black or brown or olive, or a bright color. I like chartreuse, pink, something like that, because I believe it adds like a hot spot to the fly, and sometimes it'll get a tough fish's attention, and it'll come up and whack it. We're going to use Hairline English hackle pliers, a Dr. Slick ceramic bobbin, Anvil micro scissors, Wapsu Cyclops beads in 1/8 diameter in copper, Daiichi 1720 wet nymph hooks in size 8, Hairline chenille, ultra chenille in medium, color black, and Hairline marabou in black. And then for our hackle, we're going to be using a Wapsi Indian cock saddle patch in black. So to get our thread into our bobbin, what we're going to do, we're going to take the bobbin, the back of the bobbin right here, the prongs, or take the spool and we'll stick the spool in there and let the prongs go back down on top. Now to get the thread up through it, a lot of times with regular straight metal tube bobbins, you can just take a bobbin threader and stick it down the tube and grab the thread and pull it back up. But with ceramic bobbins, you're going to end up scratching the ceramic on the inside, and eventually you're going to ruin your bobbin. So what I do, I pull off a good little chunk of thread, put it on my tongue, my lips, I wet it, make sure that the ends doesn't have any frays on it, I cut it, and then I'll stick it in the bottom of the tube, and I take the top of the tube right here, and I stick it in my mouth and suck the thread right through. So now I'm going to take my hook, and my bead, now if you want to look a bit closer, you'll see I'm going to take the point of the hook, I'm going to put it through the smallest hole on the bead. Sometimes it's a little tough to get over the barb, so what I do, I take my thumbnail and I press down onto the bead and push it over the barb like that. Try not to drop my hook. And I'm going to put it into the vise, stick it in the jaws like that, and close the lever like that and clamp it down. Make sure it's not going anywhere. You can flick it in the hook. Make sure your hook's not coming out. You just don't want to be in the midst of tying your fly and have your hook slip out. It's no fun. A lot of times you end up screwing up. So now what we're going to do, take our thread here. You don't want to have too much, but you don't want to have too little coming out of the tip of the bobbin. Take my thread, I'm going to lay it up against the shank of the hook and wrap away from myself. I'm going to wrap a couple times over top the thread just to get it nice and secure and in place. You want to start your thread at the point of the fly where we as fly tiers call it the head, up near the eye, or on this particular pattern near the bead. And now we're going to take our thread and we're going to do what we call advance the thread backwards. And I'm just going to wrap my thread backwards along the shank of the hook, covering up the hook. And we do this so that the materials don't slip, they don't roll. A lot of times, if you were to tie a fly without covering the shank of the hook with the thread, your material is going to roll over the shank and ruin your fly. So what we're going to do, we're going to trim our excess here. Take our scissors, and as close as we can get without cutting anything we don't want to cut, trim it. Now we're going to take our marabou right here, and when I'm looking for a marabou plume, what I'm looking for is something that's kind of fluffy, not really straight, like really thick, straight fibers. You don't want those. They may look good in the package, but they don't look good on the hook. Something like that, nice and fluffy. And just kind of take your fingers and preen it and get it so it's manageable. Some people like to wet it. It does make it easier. I've just always done it this way, and it's a habit of mine. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the marabou, I'm going to place it at the bend of the hook. But before I do that, I want to size it out because I want my tail to be about as long as my hook shank. Now place that on the bend of the hook, switch over to my left hand, do the same thing, pinch it. Now I'm going to take my thread, make a loose wrap over top, slowly tightening as I go back around, and then make several tight wraps right there at the bend of the fly. Now I like to twist my marabou up like this. I think it makes it easier to control it. And then I'm going to wrap my thread up the shank of the hook, lashing down this extra bit of marabou. And I like to do this on woolly buggers because I believe it adds a little bit more bulk to the fly. Because what you're going for with a woolly bugger is you want it to push water when it moves through a river or any body of water that it's on. Alright, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to take our chenille, and if you want to look a little bit closer here, you'll see I'm going to take my fingernails here, my right hand holding the material in my left. I'm going to strip off the coating, and this just lets me tie in a big piece of the material without adding bulk to the fly. So now what I'm going to do here, just like we did with the marabou, I'm going to take my chenille, I'm going to pinch up against the bend of the hook, and take my thread, make a loose wrap over top, slowly pulling more tension as I come around, and then make several nice firm wraps, and then wrap up the shank of the hook, tying that material down nice and firmly. Once you bring it up to the head of the fly, advance your thread back down to the bend of the hook. Now it's time for our hackle. And what we're looking for in our a good woolly bugger hackle is you want something that's nice and long and fairly thick that tapers a lot from the tip right here to the stem down here. So I pluck that out, take my feather, and now what we're going to do to prepare this feather, we're going to strip the fluff off, and the fluff's pretty obvious what it is. It's this fluffy stuff at the back, down at the stem of the feather. I'm going to take my finger and my thumb, grab it, and firmly pull in the opposite direction the fibers are facing, which is down towards the stem, with the thick part of the feather. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the tip of the feather up here. This is the stem, this is the tip. I'm going to grab that nice and gently, and I'm going to very gently take my thumb and my forefinger and stroke the fibers of the feather down, nicely separating them from each other. And I'll explain this in greater detail when I actually wrap the feather up the shank of the hook. So they're just like the marabou and the chenille. I want to put it at the bend of the hook, make a couple tight wraps around it, wrap up to the head, and then wrap back down. And now, unlike the other times, we're going to bring our thread back up towards the eye of the fly. So now I'm going to take my body material here, which is my chenille, and just like my thread, I want to wrap away from myself. So I'm bringing it around, and wrap it. And as we're wrapping it, you want to make sure it's nice and tightly wrapped around the hook shank, covering up any sort of chartreuse thread you might see showing through it. You just want to see all black chenille along the body. That's all you want to do. You want to wrap it up to the head of the fly. Take your thread and wrap your thread over top of the material. Do that 3, 4, 5 times. You don't want to do it too much, you don't want to do it too little. Trim your excess there. And now I'm going to take my hackle here. I'm going to wrap it forward. And now, like I said earlier, the reason that we stroke these fibers back here and separated them from each other is that as we wrap forward on the shank of the hook, if we didn't separate them, they'd get all trapped up underneath of the stem. And stroking it back kind of just makes that, you know, a little bit easier to manage. And then another thing we can do is as I'm wrapping away from myself, like always, what I can do, I can take my pointer finger and my thumb on my left hand and gently stroke the fibers back along the hook shank. And you can make 5 or 6 wraps up the shank of the fly. And this is a technique called palmering. We wrap a hackle up the length of a hook. And once we get up towards the head of the fly, you can make 3 or 4 nice even wraps with the hackle. Kind of give a little bit of bulk up towards the head of the fly, and then I like to strip off my excess. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to wrap over top of the stem, and you're going to trim your excess. Alright, so now we're going to do our whip finish. And we're done. And that's our black woolly bugger.